Discover the amazing woman who changed the life of a millionaire CEO in just 30 days. Brian Thompson stood at the helm of a $1 million empire, touted as a success story in Chicago's corporate world. He had the home, the cars, and power that left many in envy. Yet, inside him, a storm brewed, a gnawing emptiness that echoed louder with each advancement, like a distant siren marking the end of serenity. He had grown up in modest digs, taught by parents who instilled values of hard work and integrity. But as he soared, those teachings faded, buried beneath layers of ambition tinged with greed. The scandal hit like a punch to the gut. Reports raced across newspapers, tearing through his carefully constructed image. He scrambled for cover, plagued by the sudden collapse of trust both in himself and his company. Hatred and disappointment simmered in every glance from employees he once regarded as family. It was in the swirl of chaos that he decided to retreat. Chicago, once a dazzling landscape of opportunity, became a prison of judgment. He caught a train back to his hometown, a place he thought had vanished from his rearview. The familiar sights of his childhood greeted him, but nostalgia turned to discomfort. The diner where his father served coffee and pie had become a faded relic. The laughter once echoing inside was replaced by silence. This is where he encountered Sarah Rodriguez, the waitress who had once worked hard for her family. Now she was a community activist, fighting tirelessly for socioeconomic changes. There was fire in her eyes, a relentless spirit he had almost forgotten. With each step towards her, the world felt brighter yet painfully real. "You don't recognize this place, do you?" Sarah asked, her voice a mix of warmth and challenge. "It's more than a memory. It's where dreams grow through grit." Her words pierced through his bravado, igniting an internal conflict as he wrestled with guilt over the privilege he clung to. To him, her struggles were a constant reminder of his own abandonment of foundational values. Their paths collided in unexpected ways as they united for a community project aimed at lifting others from poverty's grip. Each time they met, tension crackled. One day, Brian brought his corporate mindset to the table, arguing meritocracy. Sarah met it with fierce opposition, accentuating the need for support. "It's not just about hard work, Brian. It's about giving people the tools to climb higher," she asserted, her passion sparking something dormant within him. "Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue." Days shifted towards weeks, unraveling layers of pretense he had worn like armor. Brian watched as Sarah bled hope into her community, bridging gaps with love and determination. He started to understand. True leadership meant empowering others, not just climbing over them. And in the final moments of their project, a crisis arose, resources dwindled, and despair threatened to creep back. Brian stood at a crossroads, faced with the opportunity to commit fully to the fight for equity. Would he act? Or would the shadows of his old life pull him back? The air hung thick with anticipation, setting the stage for a climactic choice, one that could alter not just his life, but countless others who sparked to dream in the darkness. Could one man's awakening truly ignite change, or had he already lost his chance? Brian felt the weight of his decision pulling at him, and for the first time in years he was terrified. The thought of stepping back into a world that had once shown him so much abundance, but now seemed drenched in greed, made his stomach churn. Yet, Sarah's unwavering spirit beckoned him closer to the edge of change. She had made it her life's mission to build bridges where gaps had once widened, and her conviction set his heart racing. Why not invest in people's potential? Brian mused aloud, testing the waters of his own resolve. The question floated through the air, fragile yet full of promise. Sarah's eyes lit up with possibility. "Exactly," she exclaimed, enthusiasm dancing on the outskirts of her voice. "People aren't just numbers or statistics. They're dreams waiting to become realities. We can give them the tools and the guidance. Starts with you, Brian." Her passionate urgency ignited something deep within him. The idea of being more than a CEO, more than a distant figure behind a corporate curtain, resonated like music he'd forgotten how to play. He was standing at a precipice, watching life below flutter with hope, and all he had to do was take that leap. But leap into what? The tension in the air shifted as he weighed his options. His mind raced. Could he truly risk his reputation, the very identity he had built? But the thought of retreating to his cold, secure world felt suffocating. He remembered the faces of employees he had let down, the trust broken, dreams dimmed. What if he began, halting as doubt echoed inside him? What if we choose to pave a path that redefines success? Sarah interrupted, her eyes probing his. Real success isn't just about you. It's about us. How many lives can we change together if you truly put your heart into it? Brian's heart thundered as the gravity of her words sank in. He envisioned storefronts revived, kids smiling in freshly painted playgrounds, families thriving instead of barely surviving. With shaking hands he glanced at Sarah, whose gaze held a blend of faith and challenge. It was a reminder of all he could achieve if he dared to break free from fear. Just then, an unexpected voice broke through the moment. "Hey you two. Hope I'm not interrupting," came Eloise, one of the project coordinators, her face bright but marred with concern. "We've got a meeting with the local council next week to push for more funding. Can we count on your support, Brian?" He hesitated. Of course. Absolutely." Sarah interjected, her determination surging through the room. The joy that bloomed on Eloise's face fueled Brian's internal conflict. He was being thrust into the light, and he knew there was no going back. What if this was the moment he had been waiting for? Yet, doubt clawed at him. How could he commit to something that could unravel the life he had rebuilt so carefully? Just when he thought he might withdraw into uncertainty, something shifted. He could help build more than just a project, he could create a legacy. With a deep breath, Brian took a step closer to Sarah. "Count me in," he said, needing to vocalize the choice that had been simmering within. The fierce gaze of hope blossomed between them. "What?" Sarah blinked, her heart racing. "I'm ready to commit. Let us do this," he affirmed, but before she could respond, doubt flooded his mind again. The looming threat of his past still hung in the air, a constant reminder that transformation wouldn't come without sacrifices. As they walked out together, Brian wondered if he truly had the strength to see this through. What if their collective dream turned into another failure? The sun dipped below the horizon, casting shadows as they stepped outside, uncertainty and excitement dancing within him. The call for a change had been made, but would they see it through? With so much at stake, Brian found himself standing on the brink once again, the weight of the world resting upon his shoulders. The questions loomed large. Could he silence the echoes of his past? And if he did, what might the price of his commitment be? The path ahead was uncertain, and, after a moment's pause, Brian turned to Sarah. "What if we fail?" As the twilight deepened, Sarah simply smiled. "What if we don't?" Her response hung in the air like an open door. Would he walk through it, ready to reshape his destiny, or retreat into the shadows he knew all too well? The next morning, Brian woke to a surge of determination coursing through him. He grabbed his phone and stared at it, contemplating how to transform yesterday's promise into action. It was easy to commit in the heat of the moment, but following through? That was a different mountain to climb. That a message from Sarah illuminated the screen, a simple yet powerful invitation. "Let us meet at the cafe 10 a.m. We have a lot to discuss." He could feel the weight of anticipation press against him as he got dressed. The idea of what he had committed to fueled his heart. This was no longer just about him. It was about the community, about giving people something more substantial than employment hope. Walking into the cafe, the aroma of fresh coffee and the soft hum of conversation wrapped around him like a cozy blanket. Sarah sat at a corner table, her face brightened by the morning light. She looked up, and her smile ignited something inside him. She was the embodiment of hope, a living, breathing reminder of everything he could be. "Hey there," she greeted, and her enthusiasm seemed to push back the shadow of doubts that lingered in him. "Hey," he replied with a nervous smile. "So what's the game plan?" She pulled out a notebook, her excitement bubbling over. "I've talked to some local leaders about our project. They're eager to meet with us. We'll outline our vision, get feedback, and discuss potential partnerships. This could mean real resources flowing into the community, Brian." The sound of her voice and the fire in her eyes made Brian's heart race. He couldn't help but imagine the impact they could have. But anxiety coiled in the pit of his stomach. What if they reject us? What if they don't see the value in our ideas? Then we adapt, she said firmly. It's part of the process. This isn't just about getting there, yes. It's about opening a conversation. We can't be afraid of taking risks. Brian nodded, trying to absorb her confidence. Her unwavering belief became fuel for his hesitant spirit. He had always been so accustomed to the predictable, the calculated. Risk was something to be avoided. Yet, standing here, he felt a flicker of excitement, a spark of what might be. Cue the sound of a bustling cafe as more people streamed in, their laughter and chatter providing an invigorating backdrop to their conversation. Sarah jotted down ideas and challenges, her pen flying across the pages. Brian watched her, admiring the way she poured her heart into this mission. What makes you so passionate about this? He asked, shifting the momentum back to her. She paused, looking thoughtful. I grew up in a community where opportunity was limited. I watched people, their dreams stifled. I don't want anyone to feel they can't reach for more. Everyone deserves that chance. Her words reverberated within him. He thought of his own life. What had it been like when the world was at his feet? But in the pursuit of more, he had lost sight of the simple joys and the value of connection. I want to do this, he finally said, conviction rising. Not just for the project but for the people who need it. That's exactly it. Sarah beamed, her excitement contagious. They spent the next hour synergizing ideas and crafting a vision that felt both audacious and attainable. But as the conversation flowed, Brian's earlier doubts crept back subtly, like fog rolling in over a clear path. What if the reality of their ambitions came crashing down? What if he stumbled again? After wrapping up their session, Sarah glanced at him, her voice softening. Hey, remember, it's about the journey. We're going to have tough days and maybe loud voices against us? He interjected, recalling past meetings that had ended in discord. Exactly. But this time we're not doing it for us. We're doing it for everyone else. That's what matters. He looked at her, clarity washing over him. Was he ready to embrace the uncertain road ahead? As they left the cafe, a thought crossed his mind, both exhilarating and terrifying. Was the leap he took last night just the first step onto a much bigger tightrope? He turned to Sarah. What happens if it really does work? Then we change everything, she said, an earnest gleam in her eyes. Brian smiled, but the chorus of uncertainty still hummed in his heart. What sacrifices would this change demand? And was he prepared to face them? With his mind racing, they stepped into the warm afternoon sun. This was just the beginning. But the road ahead was shrouded in fog. Would their dreams truly become reality, or dissipate like smoke? And as they walked, a question echoed in the depths of Brian's mind. Was he truly ready for the fight ahead? The days that followed their meeting at the cafe went by in a flurry of activity. Brian and Sarah delved deep into their project. Their mornings filled with planning sessions and afternoons spent reaching out to community leaders. Each step brought new challenges, and each small victory felt monumental. The initial excitement began to feel like a palpable force, buzzing between them, wrapping them in a shared purpose. Every time they connected with someone, Brian felt a flicker of hope grow. But with that hope came the weight of growing responsibilities. Reports of initial meetings echoed in his mind, tormenting him with fears of failure. He would lie awake at night, his thoughts racing through every possible scenario, the possible disappointments, the harsh critiques. Just when he thought he could silence these fears, Sarah's voice would break through his haze. It's about progress, not perfection, she would remind him, her conviction a soothing balm to his anxious spirit. One day, after a meeting with a local nonprofit leader, Sarah burst into the small office they had rented. Brian, they loved our ideas. They want to partner with us. Her eyes sparkled as she spoke, and for an instant, the world outside their cramped space faded away. That's great, he replied, trying to mirror her excitement, but doubt lingered like dark clouds. What would it take to make this partnership work? What if they didn't meet the expectations they had just set? Hey, Sarah said, snapping her fingers to get his attention. This means we have a chance. We can build something powerful for the community. Her voice was filled with warmth, wrapping around him like a hug. As they began to strategize their next steps in earnest, something changed within Brian. The presence of the doubt that had once weighed so heavily began to lift. He could see the glimmers of their hard work yielding fruit. Together, they crafted a new mission statement and laid out the first initiatives they would tackle: a community garden, a job skills workshop, and a mentorship program for young adults. It felt like they were planting seeds of change. One evening, as they wrapped up a particularly long day, Brian leaned back in his chair, exhausted but exhilarated. He said, "I never thought I could be a part of something so impactful." Sarah smiled softly, her eyes reflecting a warmth that made him feel understood. "The truth is," she began, "you were always meant to be part of this change. You just needed to find the courage to step into it." Her words struck a chord within him, resonating deep in his heart. He had been hiding from himself for too long, living a life dictated by safety and expectations. As he gazed at Sarah, he couldn't help but wonder how she had become this force of inspiration in his life. But then he remembered the journey ahead. The meetings with community leaders grew closer, and with every passing day, the stakes felt higher. Just as hope flickered brightly, doubt lurked in the shadows, reminding him that success was never certain. On the threshold of their next big meeting, Brian stood looking out the window, his mind swirling with possibilities and fears. What if they don't want what we're offering? What if we misread the needs of the community? Sarah stepped beside him, placing a reassuring hand on his back. "Then we listen. We learn. We adapt. Remember why we started this. It's about more than just us." He turned to her, the intensity of her gaze grounding him. "You really believe that?" "Absolutely," she said. "Together we can do this. Just keep that fire in your heart." As they headed out into the evening light, Brian felt a surge of determination. But with that determination came the inevitable question echoing in his heart. How much longer could they truly keep pushing forward against the uncertainties? And what would happen if the cracks began to show? Tomorrow loomed large with anticipation, but a whisper of fear still lingered. Was he strong enough to see this through? The morning arrived bright and early, the sun spilling into their office like hope itself. Brian sat at the small table strewn with papers, his heart racing as he prepared for the meeting. Today felt different. The weight of uncertainty still clung to him, but the night's rest had brought clarity. Sarah's words echoed in his mind. "Together, we can do this." He took a deep breath, reminding himself of the passion that had ignited within him. The mission was no longer just about him or even Sarah. It was about the people they intended to help. Sarah entered with a steaming cup of coffee for each of them, her usual enthusiasm radiating from her. "Ready to shake things up?" she asked with a grin. "As ready as I'll ever be," he replied, trying to match her energy. They ran through their presentation one last time, ensuring every detail was polished and engaging. The local leaders they were meeting with were influential, and Brian understood the importance of making a strong impression. As they set out for the venue, he felt the familiar flutter of anxiety in the pit of his stomach. Arriving at the community center, they were greeted by a colorful mural depicting faces of various local heroes: teachers, activists, mentors. It was a striking reminder of their purpose. Brian lingered for a moment, absorbing the energy in the room, clenching the small notebook filled with notes like it was a talisman against his doubts. "Remember, it's not just about selling our ideas. It's about building relationships," Sarah reminded him, squeezing his hand for encouragement. As they were led into the meeting room, with its long conference table and bright overhead lights, Brian sensed the gravity of the moment. The leaders, a diverse group of men and women with varying backgrounds, sat before them, each wearing expressions that could range from skepticism to willingness. "Welcome, Brian and Sarah," an older woman with kind eyes said, leading the discussion. "We're eager to hear what you have planned for our community." Brian felt Sarah's supportive gaze on him, and he took the lead, sharing their vision for the community and the initiatives lined up to empower those in need. He started to lose himself in the passion of their ideas, but the moment something didn't resonate, a negative comment could slice through that energy like a knife. One of the leaders raised an eyebrow during the job skills workshop proposal, asking, "How do you know there's interest in this?" A wave of unease washed over him. "We've done preliminary surveys," he stammered, searching for supporting data. "And the interest is there. We believe believing isn't enough," the leader interrupted, crossing her arms. Brian's heart sank. Had they misjudged the community's needs? The flicker of doubt returned, fueled by the critical gaze of the leaders before them. He glanced at Sarah, whose face remained calm and steady. She leaned forward, unflinching. "What we truly need to do is start a dialogue," Sarah interjected confidently. "Yes, we have ideas, but we want to adapt them. Our goal is to foster a collaborative approach that allows you to guide us in how we can best serve the community." Brian wanted to shout in gratitude for her unwavering courage. The room grew quiet as the leaders exchanged glances. Finally, the older woman spoke again. "I appreciate that sentiment, but we've been through many initiatives. What makes you think you won't follow the same path and fade away?" Brian felt a lump in his throat. "We're committed." The intensity of his voice surprised even him. "Not just to our ideas, but to being present and responsive. We want this to be about the community, not just us. If you give us the chance, I promise we won't let you down." The leaders seemed to consider his words. A weight hung in the air, laden with possibilities and fear. Would they take a chance on them? As the meeting continued, Brian felt a shift. The initial tension began to thaw, replaced by a sense of cautious hope. Maybe this was at a turning point. But just as he began to believe in their potential, another leader asked, "What is your plan if your project fails?" That question loomed large, casting a shadow over his newly sprouted hope. Brian swallowed hard, already feeling the tightness in his chest return. Would they have the resilience to bounce back from failure? And could they truly build the bridge they so deeply wished to create? It was a risk, one they had to take together. But another truth settled in as he met Sarah's unwavering gaze. She believed in them, and maybe that was enough to ignite a brighter path forward. As they left the meeting room, Brian felt the weight of the impending decisions. What lay ahead felt daunting, yet thrilling with every step. Tomorrow was a new day, but deep down, both he and Sarah knew it would require every ounce of strength and resilience to overcome the looming challenges. Could they rise above the doubts and pressures? The journey was far from over, but what awaited next was an adventure neither of them could escape. The following day dawned with a hint of tension hanging in the air. Brian awoke with Sarah's words still echoing in his mind. "Let us foster a collaborative approach." It felt like a promise, an invitation to create something meaningful together. He quickly dressed, determination fueling him as he prepared for another day of meetings. He knew they had to act on the momentum they built as they entered the community center again. The vibrancy of the mural struck Brian anew. This time he didn't just see the faces of heroes. He felt a connection, a sense of purpose that energized him. It reminded him that behind every project, every initiative, were real lives waiting for a spark. "Let us grab a coffee first," he suggested, glancing at Sarah, eager to channel their nerves into something productive. They settled down in a corner, the caffeine fueling their spirits as they reviewed their strategy. "Today, I think we need to focus on listening," Sarah said. "We need to make it clear that we're open to feedback. Let us really understand their concerns." Brian nodded, feeling the weight of her wisdom. He believed deeply in their mission, but he realized that it was okay to admit they weren't perfect. "You're right. We need to have real conversations," he replied, feeling the apprehension fade just a little. When they entered the meeting room again, a palpable excitement tinged the air. The same leaders from the day before were present, their faces a mixture of curiosity and caution. Brian noticed a few familiar ones. The older woman with the kind eyes was there, 2 eyebrows raised, ready for a conversation that had the potential to shift the tone. "Good morning," she greeted them. "You're back. We don't often see such dedication." "We believe in what we're trying to build," Brian replied, standing a bit taller. "And today we're not just here to present. We want to hear from you." As the meeting unfolded, Brian made it a point to invite the leaders to express their thoughts and concerns. With each comment, each hesitation they voiced, he and Sarah leaned in closer, making eye contact, nodding thoughtfully. The atmosphere slowly transformed. The leaders began to open up about past failures, their fears about the approaching initiative, and how so many programs had come and gone without leaving a mark. Brian realized how important these stories were, pieces of their shared history. "Tell us what you want to see," Sarah gently prompted, her voice steady and warm. One of the younger leaders, her voice suddenly trembling, opened up. "We're tired of promises that turn to dust. We need to know you'll really stick around. This isn't just a project. It's our lives." Brian felt the gravity of her words crush down on him. He found himself at a crossroads. Could he assure them without misleading them? I can't guarantee everything will work perfectly, he admitted, feeling a tight knot in his chest. But I can promise we will be here every step of the way. We want to build something sustainable together. The room fell quiet. He glanced at Sarah, who smiled softly, and he could see that she was right. This was a dialogue, a partnership waiting to bloom. As they continued, there was a shift. The leaders began to share ideas, hopes intertwined with plans and concerns that were now met with genuine interest. Brian found that by simply listening, ideas flowed. Connections formed. Brian breathed a sigh of relief as laughter broke through moments of tension. Each smile strengthened his belief that maybe, just maybe, they could make a difference here. They rearranged their project plans based on the community's direct feedback, immersing themselves in ideas that had a real impact. As the meeting wound down, there was a palpable sense of hope. But just as they were about to wrap things up, the older woman spoke one last time. You've shown us something today, but we're still wary if you make a mistake, how will you fix it? Brian felt another wave of uncertainty wash over him. We'll listen. We'll adapt and evolve. But we need you as partners in this. The moment hung thick in the air. He knew they hadn't fully won over their skeptics yet, but it was a start. As they walked out together, Sarah squeezed his hand, a silent affirmation of the journey still ahead. The weight of their mission pressed on their shoulders, but it felt lighter somehow. Tomorrow we start planning workshops based on their input, Brian decided aloud, a smile creeping into his voice. Together, Sarah echoed, a fierce conviction behind her words. And just as they stepped outside, a figure loomed in the distance. A woman, standing boldly with an expression that hinted she had something urgent to share. Who was she, and what would she reveal? Brian's heart raced again as anticipation built. Tomorrow would be a day of reckoning. As Brian and Sarah approached the woman, her presence commanded attention. She stood tall, arms crossed, her dark hair framing a face marked by both determination and worry. Brian's heart beat faster. This was no ordinary person. There was something in her gaze that spoke of battles fought and wisdom earned. Excuse me, she called out, her voice loud enough to cut through the ambient chatter around the community center. Are you Brian and Sarah? Brian nodded, suddenly conscious of the weight of her stare. Yes, that's us. How can we help you? The woman stepped closer, her expression shifting just slightly, opening up a hint of vulnerability. I'm Elena, she introduced herself. I've heard about your initiative. We need it, but I'm afraid of the implications. What do you mean? Sarah asked gently, her tone inviting. Brian admired how easily Sarah could connect with people, her warmth a beacon in the sometimes cold atmosphere of doubt. Elena hesitated, the seriousness of her situation evident in the deep lines on her face. I work with the youth in this community, and I've seen so many programs come and go. They all promise change, yet leave a void when they disappear. I can't afford to let more kids down. You somehow seem different, but I need to know more. Brian felt a pang of empathy. He remembered the younger leader's trembling voice from earlier. So many were seeking hope in a world that had felt like it abandoned them. We understand your concerns. That's why we're here, to work together and make sure this is different, he said, trying to convey sincerity in every word. Elena shifted her weight, looking thoughtful. What if I told you that my program with the youth has had some success? We've managed to get a few teens into internships and develop their skills. But we don't have the resources or the connections to take it further. I need your insight. Brian felt a surge of opportunity. This was exactly what he and Sarah had wanted, a chance for a true collaboration. How about we meet tomorrow to discuss integrating our plans? We can share our visions and see how we can make something lasting happen together. Elena's eyes brightened, the flicker of hope sparking in the depths. I'd like that. There's so much potential here, but it has to be done right. I can't bear to see more broken promises. As they exchanged numbers, Brian felt a mix of excitement and pressure. Elena represented a bridge between their initiative and the heart of the community. If this relationship blossomed, it could lead to something transformational. Yet, the weight of expectation hung heavy. Thank you for talking to us, Elena, Sarah said, her voice full of compassion. We won't let you down. We'll work to build something that lasts. The three of them stood for a brief moment, the gravity of their collective mission hanging in the air. There was a flicker of connection, a promise made among strangers that perhaps together, They could ignite a fire of change. As Elena walked away, Brian felt tinges of doubt mix with exhilaration. Could they really meet everyone's expectations? Do you think we can do it? He asked Sarah, glancing at her with a mix of hope and uncertainty. She turned to him, her look fierce and resolute. We have to. This is our chance. Before they could ponder further, another voice broke in. What did I just hear? A chance? I'm in. It was Tim, a local activist with a reputation for stirring things up. He had a fierce loyalty to his community, but with that also came resistance to outside help. What do you mean? Brian asked, intrigued but wary. Tim stepped forward, a smirk on his lips. I want to know if you can handle the heat of this community. If you want to foster real change, you'll need more than just good intentions. Brian felt his stomach knot. He wanted to prove himself, to show that they were worthy of trust. Then let us talk, he replied, feeling both the exhilaration and the weight of what was yet to come. As they headed inside, he couldn't shake a sense of impending challenge hanging over them. What obstacles lay ahead? Would they truly be able to forge a partnership that could bring real change, or would they find, like so many before them, that the road was ultimately more treacherous than it appeared? Tim leaned against the wall as they stepped inside, his arms crossed and an eyebrow raised. He had an energy about him, edgy, curious, like a caged animal waiting to see if it would be set free or further confined. So, tell me more about this grand plan, he challenged, glancing between Brian and Sarah. Brian took a breath. The tension was palpable, but he couldn't back down now. We want to create a program that empowers the youth through mentorship. We've seen how meaningful connections can transform lives, he explained, his voice more confident than he felt. And you think you can do this in a month? Tim shot back. That's the usual timeline, right? Glad handing for a while until folks get bored? This is different, Sarah interjected, her eyes bright with conviction. We value community input. We're here to partner with people like you, Elena, and anyone else who wants to make a real change. Just think about it. What if we combined our resources? Tim's posture softened slightly, as if the idea intrigued him. And what's in it for us? He asked, gesturing toward the group gathering at the community center. You gotta understand, people around here have seen it all. They want proof. They need to see results, not just another empty promise. Brian felt the weight of Tim's question. Could he promise tangible change? He exchanged a glance with Sarah, who offered him an encouraging nod. We can start small together. We can run free workshops, set up community events, get the teens involved. They'll see for themselves that's the best proof we can offer, Brian suggested, raising his voice a notch. He needed to rally the room, to communicate hope. Tim regarded him for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then he pushed off the wall closer to Brian. You got fire, I'll give you that. But what do you know about our community? Have you even walked through these streets, heard what people are really struggling with? Brian swallowed hard, the reality of Tim's challenge hitting home. He and Sarah hadn't fully immersed themselves in the community yet. They'd come in with an idea, but now they were beginning to sense the hefty responsibility they'd undertaken. We know enough to understand we can't do this alone. We need people who are here, who understand the depth of what's going on. Elena's voice rang out just then, having returned to the room. I appreciate the enthusiasm, but let us not get ahead of ourselves. If we're going to build anything real, we need to involve the youth in the planning. It can't just be another for them project. It has to be by them too. Brian could feel the room shift. All eyes turned to him, waiting for an answer. Something in Elena's tone felt like both a challenge and an invitation. He knew they had to demonstrate commitment beyond words. You're right, he admitted, heart racing. Let us get the teens in here tomorrow. We can set up a meeting, ask them what they need. Tim considered this, the tension easing slightly. I'm in, he said at last, but his tone remained firm, as if warning them about the weight of what they were undertaking. With that, Brian felt a layer of pressure lift, but another one settled in its place. There was an unmistakable energy buzzing in the room, a mix of hope and skepticism. What had started as an innocent conversation was shaping into something bigger and more personal. Elena stepped closer to Brian and Sarah, her eyes shining with cautious optimism. If we do this right, it could be groundbreaking. In that moment, Brian felt an urge to grab hold of the opportunity. This could mean transformation for everyone involved. But as excitement braided through him, a thought darted across his mind. What if they failed? Was he truly prepared for the challenge? The room hummed with anticipation as the conversations floated around him. Let us get working, Sarah suggested. As they broke into smaller groups to brainstorm, Brian locked eyes with Tim. He sensed that this was just the beginning of a much bigger journey. What if they stumbled into hidden challenges that could turn their best intentions upside down? Would they find the influential support they needed? Or open doors to unforeseen consequences instead? The next day arrived more quickly than Brian anticipated. Mornings in the community center felt different now. The air hung thick with possibility, charged with the energy of what was to come. Brian sat in a small room filled with mismatched chairs, all facing one another as if preparing for a heart-to-heart. Sarah was setting out refreshments, cookies, fruit, and some sodas. Simple offerings, but they felt crucial, like the first bricks laid for a much larger structure. Tim arrived a little after 10, his expression a mix of skepticism and determination. He looked around the room, taking in every detail, noting how the walls that once felt bare and lifeless now welcomed life and conversation. You ready for this? He asked Brian, who nodded with a hopeful smile. Nothing felt guaranteed, but the moment was theirs. At the appointed hour, as Brian nervously glanced at the clock, the teens started trickling in. Some were curious, some bored, some clearly skeptical. The atmosphere quickly warmed as Brian and Sarah welcomed each one with friendly smiles. Brian felt their apprehension like a tangible fog. He needed to cut through it. Thanks for coming, everyone. We know things haven't always been easy around here. He began carefully, his heart racing. But today we want to hear from you. You're in the driver's seat for what we're hoping to create. A girl in the back shrugged, her disinterest obvious. What's in it for us? More workshops? More boring talks? Brian swallowed, taken aback but determined. We want to work with you, not just for you. We know we need your input to make this worthwhile. If you could shape this, what would it look like? A boy named Marcus raised his hand, revealing a spark of passion in his eyes. How about something about financial literacy? Everyone here thinks money just comes easy, like it's something we can't control. We need to learn how to manage what we have. Encouraged by Marcus's insight, Brian felt a rush of hope flow through him. That's a fantastic start. We could organize workshops on budgeting, saving, and even investing. He could see Sarah smiling at Marcus, clearly impressed. As ideas bounced around the room, energy built like a wave crashing against the shore. They spoke about art programs, sports leagues, mental health workshops, ideas fused and twisted into something unpredictable yet beautiful. But just as conversations soared, a shadow darted through the room. A girl named Jasmine, usually vibrant, sat silently. Brian noticed her fidgeting with a bracelet on her wrist. What about, real-world issues? Like mental health? She finally whispered, catching the group's attention. My brother is struggling. He doesn't want to talk, but he needs help. The weight of her words settled like a blanket. Brian's heart sank. This was a conversation they had to have, and it was crucial. You're right, Jasmine. We can't ignore that. Mental health affects everything, and that needs to be a part of our discussion too. For just a moment, the room fell into silence, everyone absorbing the reality that was thrust into the light. Tim cleared his throat, breaking the tension. Well, it looks like you've made a pretty good case for what we need. I bet we can get some community leaders in on this. The teenagers looked excited, hope bubbling up through the initial doubts. Brian's heart raced as he thought about how much they had achieved in just a short time. They were planting seeds of change, but a nagging thought gnawed at him. How deep did this community's struggles run? Would they be able to dig beneath the surface, tackle the issues that really mattered? As they wrapped up their discussion, Brian caught Jasmine's eyes again. She looked scared but determined. Will we actually be able to make a difference? She asked, vulnerability spilling over her words. Brian caught a glimpse of the journey they all were about to embark on, each question, each idea exchanged, each fear brought into the open. This was it. He felt that first spark of change, but what lay beyond those walls? Could they truly break cycles and build bridges in a month or less? As they laughed and brainstormed, a sense of urgency swelled. Tomorrow they would have to confront the deeper issues, things that might bring them face to face with realities they weren't ready for. What awaited them in those hidden alleys of struggle and triumph? Would they find the strength to face the ghosts of their stories and fight for a future that mattered? The next morning held both anticipation and dread. Brian paced back and forth in their community center office, his mind swirling with thoughts. The conversations from yesterday echoed loudly, vibrating within him like the lasting hum of a tuning fork. Today they would dive into the heart of the community's struggles, real conversations about hopes, fears, and dreams. He was terrified and excited all at once as they prepared for the meeting. Sarah arrived, her cheerful smile immediately lighting up the room. "Ready to go?" she asked, her enthusiasm infectious. "Not really, but we have to," Brian replied, trying to suppress his anxiety. They set up chairs in a circle, and soon the room filled with teens eager yet uncertain. The apprehension was palpable, yet beneath it lay a flicker of hope. A dozen faces turned toward Brian, expectation hanging in the air like an electric charge. "Listen, yesterday was just the beginning," Brian started, his voice steadier than he felt. "We want to understand what you all are really going through, what you need. Don't hold back. This is your chance to be heard." The silence that followed felt heavy. Then a young man named Kyle spoke up. "My mom works 2 jobs just to pay rent. She's exhausted. It makes everything harder for me and my siblings. We need support for families like mine." Brian felt a pang in his heart. He remembered the sacrifices his own parents had made. "How can we help?" he urged, leaning forward, genuinely invested. Another voice piped up. "Maybe tutoring or mentorship programs for younger kids. Kids need help with homework. It could be a way to lighten the load." "Absolutely," Sarah chimed in, blazing with enthusiasm. "You guys know what you want. We can make this happen." As ideas started to flow, Brian felt waves of hope washing over the group. Conversations turned into brainstorming sessions, laughter blending with moments of intensity. Together they sensationally sculpted visions, art classes, sports leagues, financial literacy, and mental health advocacy. Then Jasmine spoke again, her voice soft yet powerful. "What about support for those like my brother? He needs to know he's not alone. We all need that." Brian turned to her, his heart swelling with admiration. "That's a critical point. Mental health is just as important as anything else. We'll make sure it's part of what we offer." The atmosphere shifted. Activism began to take root in the air. Each shared story fed the flame of possibility within that room. As the discussions deepened, they began to weave a golden thread of connection that would lead to authentic change. "Let us rally the community leaders," Tim suggested, his earlier skepticism giving way to a palpable energy. "They need to see how fired up you all are." An urgency spread through the group. Brian felt it, an intense craving to turn their visions into action. They threw ideas around about a community event, a gathering that showcased their dreams and desires. As the meeting wrapped up, Brian looked at each of the eager faces in the room, infused with resilience. He felt a warmth spread in his chest. They were all in this together. Suddenly, Sarah turned to him, her eyes alive. "I believe we can do this, Brian. Our voices together have power. We can create something real." "Yes," he responded, inspired, his voice heavy with determination. "It's time to show everyone how much we care and how much this matters." They left the community center buzzing, momentum surging. Over the next few weeks, as they solidified plans for the event, it became an embodiment of unity. The teens took ownership, inviting friends, family, local leaders, and the media. Everyone was eager to witness a transformation, a symbol of hope. On the day of the event, the sun shone brightly over the field, laughter spilling through the air as stalls filled with joyous interactions and vibrant hues were set up. Music played softly in the background, and Brian marveled at the outpouring of support as the crowd gathered. Silence fell, giving way to Jasmine's speech, her voice steady and strong. "We are here together," she began, addressing the community that had often felt overlooked. "We are not voiceless, and we won't be satisfied with surface-level changes. We want to thrive." The crowd erupted into cheers, and Brian felt tears prick his eyes. This was transformative. Brian stepped up next, sharing his own journey and the road of awakening he had traversed due to their shared initiative. He vowed to commit every resource to work alongside them all. "Together we'll build bridges." No more empty promises, this is only the beginning. Among those words, doubts that used to echo like haunting specters faded into the background. As the sun set, casting a golden hue across the field, the spirit of the community soared. Connections formed. Hugs exchanged. They had proven that true success sprouted not from self-interest but from uplifting one another. In that moment, with Sarah by his side, Brian finally felt whole. Yes, the uncertainty of tomorrow still loomed, but with every voice raised in unity, he knew they could conquer whatever followed. They had each other, and they had found their purpose once more with renewed vigor and a heart full of hope. Brian understood this was the success he had always chased, not the one he had been falsely led to believe. Change was not just a destination. It was a beautiful journey that they would navigate together. As they celebrated amidst laughter and camaraderie, Brian turned to Sarah, his heart swelling with gratitude. "Thank you for igniting this path in my life." She smiled back full of warmth. "And thank you for choosing to walk it with me." And in the embrace of community, they found not just their purpose, but their new family. Now you need to take action. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive stories that can light the fire within you. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and make sure this inspiring story reaches those who need it the most. Comment below your reactions and feelings about this powerful ending. Let's hear your voices. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformation. Don't wait not even one more second to share. True fans like you understand the importance of supporting the channel with these actions. Together we can keep the momentum going.